we can plan out the next 12 months. We can plan out the next 18 months, 3 years. The reality in sports is you should plan as much as you can, but you also have to be prepared at every moment that something's going to happen.
Very happy to welcome Tom Braun. He's the President of Business Operations and Chief Operating Officer at the LA Galaxy. Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sean. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Not a problem at all. I always start asking people how they got their start into the world of sports and how they entered the world of sports, and especially in your case, and I'll let you answer it, how did you get your start in the world of sports?
So my start in sports is, I think, a little bit of a non-traditional way. I think it's a bit more traditional nowadays than it was when I started in sports not too long ago. So bear with me. I'll tell you a little bit about my background and my story. When I graduated college, seems like many, many years ago, I kind of fell into a similar bucket that a lot of people did. And you didn't really know what you wanted to be when you grew up. And the school I went to, a lot of people ended up working in finance. When I graduated college, I started working for an investment bank for about 6 or 7 years. And while it was amazing experience, I learned a ton. I wasn't passionate about it. And I did it during a really tough time. I did it during the recession, the housing collapse. I was fortunate enough that during that time, I'd met my then fiance, now my wife, and it was always her passion, believe it or not, to be in sports. Coincidentally, she got her dream job. We were living in Washington, D.C. at the time, and she got her dream job in Los Angeles. So we decided on a whim that we were going to pack up my Jeep Wrangler, drive cross country, end up in Los Angeles, and I was going to pursue a different career. And again, I didn't know exactly what that career was going to be. And she encouraged me to sports because it was always her passion to be in sports. She had worked for so many different leagues and teams. And it had never dawned on me when I was younger that sports was a path. So she convinced me that I have a background. I was a baseball player through college, had the opportunity to be drafted by the Oakland A's, and it didn't work out for me professionally on the sports side as an athlete, but she convinced me to pursue something on the business side. So knowing that we were in Los Angeles and knowing that I was kind of married, I was literally married to Los Angeles at this point, I pursued an MBA at the University of Southern California at USC. And the reason why I chose USC was because there was one professor who ran the sports business practice at USC. And I knew that if I wanted to get my foot in the door at sports, this would be a really good avenue or a real opportunity for me. So fortunate enough, USC accepted me into their business school program. And then it became my sole mission to become that professor's best friend with the hope that maybe his huge list of contacts might allow for me to break into sports. And fortunate enough, it did. Within the first couple months of me being in my MBA program, this professor told me about a really cool opportunity. And remind you, I was a VP at an investment bank. And the really cool opportunity presented to me was an unpaid internship at AEG. And for those who aren't familiar with AEG, AEG is the parent company to the LA Galaxy. Owners of the LA Kings, owners of Crypto.com Arena, the O2 in London, multiple venues, multiple sports teams, Coachella Music and Arts Festival, many things that people are aware of. So I took the unpaid internship. I sat in a cubicle and I actually paid USC $1,500 for my one credit to be allowed to take my unpaid internship. So I actually paid money for my first job in sports. Make a long story a bit longer, that unpaid internship, which was in analytics, turned into a part-time job in which the company was gracious enough to pay me $10 an hour as a part-time while I was still getting my MBA. Turned into a full-time job overseeing analytics for the LA Kings and the LA Galaxy, which then turned into a full-time job running business operations for the LA Galaxy, and then subsequently landed in my president job with the LA Galaxy last year.
So I want to stop you there because I love this story and I don't want to go take too many steps forward. But do you think, having that fun, there are a lot of people that, switching lanes, coming from another path, whether it is as, marital in your case to sort of cause the change, or, hey, this is where I want to go. Do you think, all of those reps you were putting in on the finance side and looking at businesses and analyzing numbers and, especially in a downturn market, like it's a tougher thing to work in the finance space. It's easy when it's booming, but like to find the winners and help businesses turn around. Like, do you think, were you looking when you started to look into the sports saying, how can I apply those skills into the world of sports? Or is that sort of some of your process to go, well, what can I do in sports? Where did my skill set fit?
Yeah, I think anybody who wants to break into sports, it's how are you differentiating yourself? Sports is such a sought after profession. A lot of people have a passion for sports. Oftentimes people think they want to be in sports, but oftentimes people don't really want to put their chips in the middle of the table, so to speak, and actually go for it. For me, the background in finance was simply that. My affinity to numbers and turning that into an affinity in finance into an affinity for data and analytics. That was my foot in the door. That was my opportunity. Sports teams don't often do very complicated finance. We do budgets. We run budgets. That's not overly complicated, where there's a lot to it. It's very different than the finance world that I was originally in. So for me, it was taking something that I was good at. I think always going back and getting more education is always a positive thing. How are you differentiating yourself through just learning? And for me, I was thirsty to learn. I was eager to learn about sports. And then after getting your foot in the door, I think anybody who has the foot in the door and given that opportunity, it just becomes, how hard do you want to work for it? What's it going to take to prove yourself?
And like you described there, AEG, because it had, in that initial role, had so many different properties. You would have worked with a good friend of mine who's been on the pod a couple of times, Aaron Lavalley at AEG, like to learn from people like him that are in the business, but also to learn the different businesses that AEG is a part of would have been a good, sort of like that accelerated MBA because you've got multiple properties there.
Yeah. Fun fact, Aaron Lavalley was my first boss at AEG. So I know Aaron very well. I didn't know he's been on your pie. That's amazing. Great guy. That's the beauty of AEG. AEG is such a very diverse and big company, but it's also very close-knit at the same time. And we collaborate on so many different things, whether it's sports or music or sponsorship, ticketing. There's so much overlap in what we do, and that's really the foundations, I think, of what AEG is about, is how are you collaborating with your peers who might not actually work directly for the team that you work for, but have a similar role, but for an adjacent team or business property. So that's the very special thing, I think, about AEG. And for those who don't know, I mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, but AEG, I think if you've been to a live event in some capacity, especially in the States, but even globally, the likelihood is you've been to some AEG event in some capacity.
Absolutely. Episode 400, we had David Jones, who's the CTO for AEG, and talking about things like all the technology rolled out at crypto.com arena and the like. So, most definitely, there would be every podcast listener who's been to an AEG venue or team in some way or another. Going from AEG, which is, the owner in multiple operations, to the Galaxy in that first role, how was that? A bit of different having soccer in the title. How was it sort of looking at the high performance side of sports, the sports business?
Yeah, so my transition was a little easy, right? I was in a dual role between the LA Kings and the LA Galaxy, and shifting solely into soccer and for the LA Galaxy in our development system. It was a pretty smooth transition. A lot of what I was doing previously transitioned really effectively into the new role. But so for us, it's really how are we running an efficient business? And that was my main priority when coming over to the Galaxy, is how are we going to take this business that we're running? We'll continue to grow it, find ways to grow our revenues, and really I think the way that you grow revenues is how you connect with your fan base and what meaningful steps are you taking to make sure there's a connection or an avidity between your fans and your team. And we talk about it internally a lot. Likely nothing more important than wins and losses. People understand that, and a team's success on the field is hugely critical to oftentimes how people feel about the team. However, we do think that there's a deeper layer of it, that fans are connected almost for a deeper meaning than simply fans and losses. And I think when you look at a soccer club, oftentimes that's viewed a little bit differently, especially in the States, but even globally, in Europe and other clubs are built out. It's almost like a member of a club, and people's attachment to soccer teams might be a little bit different than your attachment to an NFL team. And each fan has their own place and have their own passion. But soccer, I think, just hits a little bit differently. And our job really is, how are you going to connect as a business or as a club with those fans outside of just wins and losses, which are, as I said, hugely important still.
And is that been, you're now in the CEO role, that's your current role, is that your key focus, putting that fan lens and that fan avidity piece at the center of everything you're doing, whether it's stadium developments or ticketing campaigns or content campaigns?
Yeah, a huge priority of ours is, how are you listening to your fans? What are your fans looking for, and how are you entertaining them? We're in Los Angeles. Los Angeles has 12 or so professional sports teams. I'd argue that's more sports teams than any city in the world has, right? We have so many teams. But beyond just having so many teams, We have so much that draws people to Los Angeles, from Hollywood to, you can go snow skiing or you can go skiing in the water, right? You have so many different options. You go to the beach or the mountains. So how are you connecting with people where people have a discretionary amount of money that they can spend? And how do you convince them that they want to spend it with you, with the LA Galaxy, or they have a limited time? And how do you want to connect with them that they spend that limited time with you as the LA Galaxy? So it's a top of all of our priorities. The experience that our fans are having, there's a way to connect with them online, but there's a different way to connect with them in the stadium. So we've spent a lot of time in the last 12 to 18 months is how are we improving and enhancing our fan experience? So the second that you purchase a ticket, that ticket ends up in your wallet, or otherwise you drive down our main driveway, you connect with our parking, you enter the gates, you buy concessions, you watch the game. How are we making you feel so that when you leave the stadium, we want you to come back. We want you to experience again. So that's a huge focus and priority to everything we do every single day.
And has that been part of the reason that sparked your LA Galaxy fan council and sort of getting that, listening, but also from the fans? Because, you being in analytics previously, you could be looking at reports and making assumptions, but if you're not actually talking to the fans, sometimes it can be a little bit off. Has that been some of the things that you've been trying to learn and implement from the fan council?
Absolutely. So we're actually, tonight is our first meeting of our second year of our fan council. We had a huge amount of success with the first round of it. Hearing what your fans have to say and listening to them and trying to take what they're telling you and put it into practice is critical to what we do. And a lot of what I do is looking at surveys. It's listening to fans. I also spend a lot of time listening to fan podcasts and hearing from them in different ways of what's important to you. How can we make your experience better? I think sometimes we're too deep into it and we forget to realize that maybe there's something that we can do that can make a huge impact on an overall fan experience. And now, sometimes you can make really big impacts, or sometimes you can make a lot of small impacts that add up to a big impact. Our job is to listen, take that information, and actually have change and show improvement. I think if you can't just stand still, and I think for a long period of time, we didn't make the necessary improvements that we needed to, or we didn't take the feedback the right way. Now it's a mission of ours. We need to do things differently. And I'd argue the LA Galaxy is the biggest team in Major League Soccer. I'd say we're the biggest team, one of the biggest teams in North America. But we have to continue to reinvent ourselves. And in Los Angeles, like I said, we have 12 professional sports teams. We have to constantly outpunch our weight class, so to speak, right? We have to continue to remind people why they want to come to an LA Galaxy game, or as opposed to going to SoFi Stadium, which is a $5.5 billion US stadium that happens to be 15 minutes away from here. So we have to perform at a different level to compete in a really difficult market.
So one of the things that is hard in sports is change and doing something differently. How do you, I guess, either reset the culture or set the culture to say, oh, we've heard this from the fans, or we've heard this from the fans council, or the data is saying we want to either make this small change, which sometimes is just as hard as, oh, we want to make this big change and make this big song and dance about it. How do you go about one, I guess, enabling and empowering your staff to do that, but also, I guess, have some data and science to say what's the why behind it?
Yeah, we really challenge our staff, I think, in a really meaningful way. We hire a very diverse staff of people. We take people who come into our staff that maybe have never worked in sports before, or maybe work sports adjacent, or casually be involved in sports. We want different perspectives and bring that in and kind of rock the boat a little bit. Let's mix things up. And I really think that's the beauty of Major League Soccer and MLS is that's what we're doing as a league, is we're challenging the norm in so many different ways that it's creating a league that's not going to be 30 years old when we kick off our season on February 3rd for us. 30 years old for a league that had a lot of challenges for a domestic league, not MLS specifically, but for America to create a domestic league was really hard. And in fact, Major League Soccer was birthed out of the 1994 World Cup. Our league started in 1996. And 30 years later, we're moving into our 30th season. And in 2026, you have the World Cup coming back to North America. It's really a full circle moment where it's only going to continue to propel soccer and the sport of soccer and the business of soccer forward when the biggest event in the history of the world is going to be happening in our backyard, on our soil really soon.
I mean, and that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about, the opportunity of the World Cup. Obviously, you get all the attention will be on the game, and there's that overflow of fans going, well, I've watched the world's best in a World Cup. How can I get my fill of soccer, football, Paul, if you will, if you're talking about the global game. How are you looking to take advantage of that opportunity?
Yeah, whenever the World Cup comes around, whether it's in the US or elsewhere, you see a huge lift in just the amount of attention on soccer. So we're looking to capitalize it. We have some really cool initiatives planned over the next 12 to 18 months that's really going to lean in. But I think it's important that we are on top of our game and kind of hitting this inflection point of making sure that we are the team that's competing at the highest level that we can be going into the World Cup. We have competitors in our league that are 10 minutes down the street. We have to continue to fight to make sure that we are the team that everyone thinks about when they think about soccer or think about Los Angeles or think about Major League Soccer. So how are we gathering and gaining that attention? We have a lot of really great initiatives we're going to roll out over the next few months that I think is going to be really effective. And hey, we're coming off of a championship in 2024, which we're incredibly proud of. We won our 6th MLS Cup, which is the most successful team in Major League Soccer. And we're not done yet. We're going to be competitive again this year and look to compete, hopefully do it again.
I did want to ask you about that wins and losses side and that success, on the pitch. One of the keys of sports business success is having your teams and systems ready for that moment and ready to, hey, here's our opportunity. Let's put the foot down and really take advantage of it. What were some of the ways that you and the team were able to take advantage of that on-field success?
Yeah, sometimes people will say, well, if the team's winning, then everything is a lot easier. I would argue that everything becomes a lot more difficult because the attention and the accountability just raises to a different level. We have an incredible staff at the LA Galaxy, a really senior, capable staff that just was from the first game of the year till the end was just on point the entire season. Last year, we built a lot of our season off of having big moments, and we took some challenges. And if you look back, the LA Galaxy finished in 13th, 14th place in our conference in 2023 to go on in 2024 to win the championship. And we challenged ourselves from the beginning. And what we did is we hosted what many people believe to be one of the top teams in the league with Inter Miami as our first game of the season. David Beckham's helped build Major League Soccer, was a part of our team for so many years, and he has an ownership stake in Inter Miami. And of course, Lionel Messi, which everybody knows, coming to our stadium, the energy and the excitement around the game just took our team to a different level, set us up for the season. We ended up walking away with a tie on a last-minute goal by Lionel Messi in I think the 92nd or 93rd minute that tied it 1-1. But I think that moment gave us this belief as a club that, hey, we're on to something here. And we built on it all season. We had an incredible turnout for a rival game against our opponents, LAFC, at the Rose Bowl, where we had, I think, over 70 or 80,000 people at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. And we followed it up with having a really successful run in the playoffs, in which our team scored 18 goals, which is the highest amount of goals that any team has ever scored in the history of the MLS Cup playoffs. And we capped it off by lifting a trophy. So along the way, we had these really monumental moments. We launched this third kit, this third jersey this past year, which was a throwback to our days when we played at the Rose Bowl originally in 1996, that our fans really just loved and fell in love with. So a lot of really great moments that just continue to build on each other and told a great story about the history of the club, but also where the club's heading into the future.
And that's one of the keys of the success too, is planning, having those moments you can plan, because there are moments you can't plan. You can't plan what a result will be and how a big rivalry matchup is going to be, but you can plan, we are going to be at the Rose Bowl, we are going to be at the third kit, and sort of giving, your whole team that cadence to go, these are big moments. They can be manufactured, but if they're done in the right way, they will tap into that identity and that passion point for fans.
I think that's a great point. When you run a business, your hope, I think, along the way in a traditional business is we can plan out the next 12 months. We can plan out the next 18 months, 3 years. The reality in sports is you should plan as much as you can, but you also have to be prepared at every moment. Something's going to happen. And I think soccer is unique for that because we don't have a traditional just regular season. We have that. We have other stuff too. We play in other competitions, other tournaments. There are friendlies. There are things that we do that traditional American sports don't do. But you have to plan for the things you just can't plan for sometimes. So our team is very agile. We take it, we roll with it, and we make the most out of it. But I think it comes down to having a really talented staff. Individuals that are willing to kind of roll with the punches, understand that things are going to change, and plan for the best and pivot when needed.
You were just saying there, the planning piece, sometimes it is hard to think outside the box. You've got your schedules, they're fixed, the dates, they're locked in, so that everything gets planned from there. But I want to ask you about the Coachella Valley Invitational as a tournament and how that came about as, something new.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite events every year. And And what it is it's preseason for Major League Soccer. And the closest thing I can relate it to is spring training for Major League Baseball. But the way it came about was really unique. And in soccer, in MLS, we don't have an organized preseason. And if you live in the States, you know that half the country around this time could be covered in snow or could be really cold. So we're in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is 75 and sunny every single day. It's a wonderful climate to live in. And so one day, a couple of years ago, my ownership called me and they said, hey, we have an idea and we want to host preseason in Los Angeles. I said, great. We essentially kind of do that every year. They said, I don't think you're understanding. We want to do it, but we want to do it in Coachella Valley. I said, interesting. For those who don't know, Coachella Valley is the home of AEG's music festival, the Coachella Music and Arts Festival, the biggest, best music festival in the world. It's amazing. If you haven't been to it before, it's absolutely amazing. And the energy that comes from it. There's 2 weekends every year that Coachella happens. And then there's one weekend after that, we call it Stagecoach, which is the country music version of Coachella. But the rest of the year, we're trying to come up with ways to use 1,000 acres of grass in the desert. The desert at this time is a lot like LA. It's 75. It's beautiful. And it's just open grass. And if you've been to Los Angeles, grass, quality professional grass in Los Angeles is really hard to come by. A lot of the houses are built on top of each other and it's really congested. Coachella, or Palm Springs, is really what people might relate it to. It's a tourist destination. So in that first year, we decided to go for it. And this was 2022, I believe. So we're still kind of in this COVID time. We convinced 5 to 6 MLS teams to come sight unseen, trust AEG, trust the LA Galaxy that we were going to host a preseason event. At this point, because COVID was still going on, we didn't open up to fans. We had some media, but the feedback that we got that first year was this was the best preseason that we've ever had as an MLS club. And this was universal across every team that came. So we thought we were on to something. So the second year we opened it up and more teams came. I think we ended up with 12 MLS teams the second year. And then we opened up to fans. The response from fans was amazing. And then the third year, which was last year, we opened it up. I think we got somewhere between 14 MLS. And this year, really great, we opened it up to NWSL, so the Women's Professional League. And the response was amazing. So we're at 18 teams. And this year, we're going into our 4th edition of the Coachella Valley Invitational. We're up to over 20 teams. And 3 weeks, you come. We have scheduled games, but we also have training sessions for the teams throughout these 3 weeks. And it's just this oasis where fans can interact with players that you don't get at a regular game, because they're just so close. After every game, teams come up, they sign autographs, they take pictures. It's just a really magical space and a magical event that we built, and we're continuing to build upon it. So we're excited about it. It's going to kick off here on February 1st. It kicks off and it'll go for 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's amazing. There is definitely a trend. I mean, in my part of the world, the NRL has Magic Round where all the teams go to one city and play all matches in one round. And the AFL has done the same in Adelaide, calling it Gather Round, bringing everyone together. It becomes that destination sports product that in this case, also works for the teams when you see other sports that are trying to figure out and unwind what preseason in, doesn't matter, where should we put it, but to flip it on its head to sort of say, oh no, we'll make it an event. And it is something that fits for football because, you do have friendlies, you do have these other tours that the fans sort of expect and it's not out of the norm. So it's been a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. There's the fan side of it, but also there's the competitive side of it. And these teams, these GMs, these coaching staff and their players, they want to prepare for the season. This is an important part of ramping up to the season. So they want to know that they're going to a location and that their team is going to be able to train the way they want to. So one of the beauties is we offer each team 2 exclusive grass fields that is theirs. They're theirs. They can come and go as they please. Their coaches are set up to be successful. So the competitive side of it oftentimes outrules the business side, because if we're not taking care of the teams and they're not enjoying their time at the event, they're not coming back. They're going to do something different. So we have to make sure we're prioritizing and taking care of them in the right way.
One of the things I did want to ask you, and sort of to timestamp this podcast, it's late January. LA has obviously been impacted by the fires, and impacted the community both from a destruction point of view, but a lot of families displaced. I saw the LA team sort of band together and sort of support affected families. What has been, how has that affected you as an organisation and also your fan base?
It's devastating. It's devastating what has happened over the last few weeks in LA and around our community. There are so many people that have been impacted by these wildfires. It's hard to know for those who live outside of Los Angeles what the real impact is, but I can assure you it's devastating, and our hearts are breaking for everybody in LA. And really, really thankful and appreciative of all the first responders and everything that they've done over the last few weeks to manage a really difficult situation. But for us, we know we have a responsibility. We're the stewards of this game, and we need to make sure that we're representing our city and our community in the best way possible. And we mentioned at the beginning, wins and losses are important. However, the way that we're responding to our community oftentimes outpaces even wins and losses. So we have a responsibility to show up for our community that so often shows up for us every single day. So we've done a number of things, which we're really proud of. Along with AEG and the LA Kings, our sister hockey team, we donated $1 million to the American Red Cross to help the efforts. And as a group of 12 sports teams in Los Angeles, we pulled together and donated $8 million, which is an incredible amount of money. There's a lot more that's needed, but it's a really great contribution, I think, on our part. The second thing we've done is we've done a supply drive. So for a couple of days last week, we opened up Dignity Sports Park, which is the stadium that the LA Galaxy play, and we had thousands of items donated that we are now taking to various shelters in and around Los Angeles. We also partnered with Fanatics and the other sports teams, and we donated over $3 million of merchandise to those families that are in need of clothes. So we worked with, in this specific case, we worked with the Dodgers and the Lakers and the Kings, and we essentially had a supply drive, and we handed out a ton of merchandise, which all of our players have been really supportive and engaged in. And we've also found and have been reaching out to various season ticket members and Galaxy fans in different ways. And then the third thing that we're doing is we're visiting local firehouses and community-specific outreach efforts to know that we care and that we're here and that we're listening. For a period of time, it was really difficult for us to gather all the information because it was so real time. Our team has come together. Our community relations team has really made an impact. But we're not done. I think it's important for us that we continue to keep this momentum and that we're giving back to the community and we keep this going to know that those that are impacted, this is going to be a long road for them.
Kudos for that, but also kudos for all of the community relations teams and the outreach teams that obviously a lot of times are unsung in what they do in the community and helping in different ways, but both what the work they do, but also the logistics that sports are very good at of, hey, we're going to open up our stadium and we're going to make these things happen. That can-do attitude that is pretty much across sports, but the fact that, sports can be I guess, an avenue and a platform to help that is absolutely vital in the long road ahead.
Yeah, there's just no better way for a community to reach out. Sports teams have this just different way of connecting with the community than anything else. And usually sports teams, people rally behind successes and failures of a sports team and feel some loyalty to a community because of sports. And that's the power. That's the power of sports. And we often talk amongst our staff, sometimes you'll go to an LA Galaxy game and it'll be 0-0. But sometimes you'll go to an LA Galaxy game and you'll see a game winner in the 90th minute. You'll walk away and something about that in sports and the power of it just makes you feel full. But sometimes it's just simply, I got to go to a game with my son and my son fell in love with it. Now I'm in love with it. And we understand that. We understand that there's just different people connect with sports in a different way. And that's the beautiful thing about sports in the community is just the way it connects.
Absolutely. And we saw it recently, with the Rams not even playing in LA, the fact that they're stepping on the field, representing LA, and the ability for that to bring the city together. I mean, that's the opportunity for the Galaxy and all LA teams to represent that LA strong message.
Yeah, I think that's the important part is we all are trying to win games. And we banded together as a group of 12 teams to come together and set aside that each team is competing for eyeballs and attention, but we know that this is a higher calling for us, is that we need to come together and collaborate in a meaningful way. And that was a really quick, easy thing to do. There was a lot of everybody rowing the same direction right from the beginning, and teams were really cooperative and wanting to contribute collaboratively.
So one thing I did want to ask you, I guess, just before we wrap up is what excites you about what's ahead for the Galaxy in 2025 and even looking ahead to the World Cup? What are the things that get you bouncing out of bed and getting into work with that pep in your step?
Yeah, I mean, working for a sports team, I think anybody who would driving to work every day would have a lot of energy and excitement about it. But a lot of it comes back to the community, the way that our fans feel in the moment. I'm really looking forward to that first home game we have against San Diego. So our home openers on February 3rd. We host San Diego FC. It's their first game as a franchise. They're entering MLS this season. They have some really great players on that team, including a really big Mexican star, Chucky Lozano, coming up to Los Angeles. We're ready to compete. We are going to celebrate a championship that day for 2024, but we're also unveiling some really amazing stadium renovations at Dignity Health Sports Park, which this would be the first time that fans have the opportunity to see these renovations. So just really looking forward to that. And then moving into the World Cup, we got to be prepared. Like I said earlier, we're going to have some really great things that we're going to announce shortly about our plan around 2026. But just being in the moment and making sure that we're capitalizing the best we can going into such an amazing time for soccer in America and in North America. It's incredible how far our league has come in simply 30 years and how far our sport has come in 30 years. For those who don't often follow the Galaxy, but we mentioned it, we're a built-out club. But we have a very extensive boys academy system. We operate a learning environment here where our student athletes can go to school, but also compete and play in our academy. We have a second team in Ventura County FC, and we have a first team. We have a built-out foundation. We are very active, and we are a very deep club. And that again, is a little bit different than I think a lot of people are familiar with in American sports. But there's just so much to offer at the Galaxy.
Absolutely. We were talking about before about those moments you can plan, like that, that season opener, the Galaxy, the champions, OG, one of the originals, and hey, here's the new upstart. It's like, again, we'll start a new rival. It's the ability to start writing a new rivalry and set that up, as well as all of the stadium and fan experience upgrades. It's a great way to kick off the season.
Yeah, it couldn't be better. We're really excited to get it going, and really excited about what the team can do this year.
So, Tom, I want to get to the Sports Geek closing five. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
It probably was a Houston Astros baseball game. I grew up in Houston. It's either that in the Astrodome, but I also, in my very young years, I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana, and probably went to a Saints game at the Superdome. So probably one of those two things, but man, it's been a while.
Definitely. You would have been to a lot of different sports events in your time. Do you have a favorite food or a favorite food memory or a go-to food at a sports event?
I unfortunately eat far too many chicken fingers at sporting events. I don't know if that's my favorite. That seems to be the most accessible and what I end up consuming the most. I think some of the best part of going to a sports event is just the different concessions that you can have at any different park. And I think what's really special about sports too is having the culture in your concessions. So for us, we have a lot of various things that might resonate with people from Los Angeles.
Yeah, most definitely. It can be a pro or a con of working in the world of sports business, the different amount of concession food you do consume, but it is getting better and better every year, like you said, with those local flavors. What's the first app you open in the morning?
I tried not to. My first app is usually my email, and I check my email. But like I said, I constantly am trying to listen to what fans are saying. So I'm kind of an Instagram guy. Anywhere I can get a good sense of what our fans are saying is important to me.
Terrific. Is there someone that you follow? Might be an author, might be a colleague or a former colleague, or might be someone on social media that the podcast listeners should give a follow, and why?
Other than yourself, I'd say I'm open. I listen to a lot of Galaxy podcasts and I listen to a lot of the fan podcasts. That's important to me. So not anybody in particular. I try to gather as much information as I possibly can, but there's probably not one singular individual that I probably lean to more than others.
I mean, I do think that fan podcast and that that fan creator ecosystem, which has definitely grown over the past 6 to 8 years, whether they be YouTubers or doing their own podcast, is giving a different point of view, and it's also what your fans are consuming. So it sort of does give you that voice of the fans. So I think it is really important.
Yeah. Any place you can consume it, and there's different ways to consume it. You take some of the information, you leave some of the information, but I think the more information you can gather on what people are saying is important. But you also there's various trends. Sports is constantly evolving, and if you're standing still, you're gonna not evolve. So you got to keep your finger on the pulse on what are other teams doing and how are they making moves.
And then the last one I always ask, and you can answer this both personally and then you can have your LA Galaxy hat on, but what social media platform is your MVP?
I just use Instagram. I use a lot of Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, but I rely a lot on my digital team to give me the information about socials, which they do a phenomenal job. But I spend a lot of my time patrolling LA Galaxy, various LA Galaxy accounts and people who connect with the Galaxy.
Terrific. Tom, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. All the best for the season ahead. I always encourage people who've listened to the podcast and got some value, which I definitely have, to reach out to the guests and say thank you. What's the best platform for them to do that?
Yeah, reach out to me on Instagram or LinkedIn. Either one are great. I'm official Tom Braun on Instagram and then just Thomas Braun on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Well, terrific. Like I said, all the best for the season ahead. And hopefully, I'm in your part of the world and can get to catch a LA Galaxy game sometime.
Yeah, please do. I'd love to have you. And thanks for having me on the pod.